So, Jousting Lances. They got buffed, and we're gonna talk about it today. I decided to take a look at these weapons because first, they got changed in the 1.4.4 update, all three of them getting standard damage buffs with the exact percentage damage increases being 7.14%, 15.38%, and 20.37%. Pretty simple. Second, I never really took a good look at the lances when they were released to figure out their potential uses and just wrote them off as a couple of silly things that Relogic put into the game as fun little additions with unique mechanics. And if you don't know why I say that, well, I mean, look at this thing. It's about the most awkward looking and feeling melee weapon in the game. Like, it just sticks out like this and deals damage to enemies that touch it. You can't just hold it out forever like this, of course. The weapon will retract if you get hit, though this can be somewhat mitigated with the Feral Claw items, which allow you to thrust the lance out again immediately. The really weird part about these weapons is the other special factor that you have to use in conjunction with these awkward mechanics, which is that the damage and knockback that they inflict increases based on the player's movement speed. So the faster you go, the more damage the weapon deals. Here's some examples of the damage scaling on a table pulled from terrariawiki.gg for the base Jousting Lance for reference. The damage of the items technically has no limit, although there isn't really a practical way to gain enough speed to hit these larger numbers. None of the standard wings and mounts can get you anywhere near the 179 maximum speed example shown on the table, so without some special setup that you can one-shot the Dungeon Guardian with, you kind of end up with this weapon that can just get to some above average burst damage levels that is still very short range and clunky. So I got to thinking, can I actually do anything with these weapons in a practical way? Before I try in my various stupid ways to answer that question, you should take a second to hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying the video. I'd really appreciate it since I'm already just about to hit 2,000 subscribers, and I've noticed that apparently a lot of the people who have been viewing my videos aren't subscribed to the channel. So like, come on man, what are you doing? Hit that damn button already. Obviously, I decided to use the Jousting Lances against some bosses, the tried and true test of viability, although I also went through some dangerous areas of progression and events just to see how they felt in standard situations, since I've never actually used them very much. And I gotta say, these items feel pretty awful. I had trouble fighting off even a hard mode goblin army, which while the Jousting Lance mows down the standard goblins with ease, has a ridiculous time trying to kill even one goblin warlock, as it's a flying enemy that doesn't take knockback, thus making it very hard to do much to it with one of these weapons. I brought the hallowed Jousting Lance into the post-Plantera dungeon and immediately regretted my decision. The close-quartered and vertically winding layout of the dungeon basically makes it impossible to use this item effectively, which is a conclusion I came to very quickly and just left it at that. The Solar Eclipse is probably the last event you'd even possibly try before ditching the lances for something else, and it didn't go particularly well here either. Now using the Shadow Jousting Lance that we've obtained from the dungeon, probably with a better item that you've now thrown away for this thing, it doesn't actually fare that horrifically if you have a blessed apple to summon the unicorn mount, which I ended up using a lot in my testing. You can keep enemies away from you pretty well and deal significant chunks of damage, though flying monsters can still give you a bit of trouble, and dealing with enemies constantly coming from all sides is a pain in the ass. Nailhead poses a huge problem when clearing the event, as you can't blast it out of your way with the Shadow Jousting Lance due to its high knockback resistance, and it has way too much health to just burst down, so you end up having to give it a wide berth, and if you get too close, you just end up dying really quickly. Mothron actually seems pretty easy to beat, honestly, since it attacks in a really simple way and you can isolate it. I definitely would have killed it here if I didn't start fighting it on like 90 health, but it is what it is. This weapon didn't perform as badly as I thought it might, but it still definitely didn't feel great. Now, that was a lot of discussion without much success, which I think should be expected considering what we're talking about. Next, we have the bosses, and I did use my character with 500 health for all of the testing because I didn't want to torture myself and was mostly interested in seeing if the boss fights could even theoretically be done with these weapons. I used my usual kind of potion setup and tried a variety of standard balanced item sets in the fights, which I'll be showing you. The first success I did have was with the Queen Slime, which I was able to kill with the normal Jousting Lance, and even though having 500 HP is cheating a little bit, I think that the conclusion that I can draw is the same, which is that it's perfectly possible. I beat the boss first try, surprisingly, and with less HP, I think it would just end up being more of a grind and needing some more optimized play. You can't really utilize the ability to gain damage through momentum super well in general against bosses because charging into them, especially in master mode, is generally a bad idea and just ends up with you taking large amounts of damage for free. But you can defeat the Queen Slime with careful movement and a bit of luck, and once you get her into the air, it's actually surprisingly easy to stick onto her and deal relatively large amounts of damage with this item because she moves in rather linear ways when flying, which can let you line up a lot of damage just by holding out the weapon in one direction. The majority of the other bosses that I tried went much worse. I completely discarded Skeletron Prime as a possibility because his spinning attack makes being close range deadly, his arms pose a huge problem because they would just get in your way, and actually trying to fight, it does in fact feel impossible. Like proposed, the arms get in your way and hit you into the boss's head when he charges at you. Attempting to deal any damage with a weapon with the range of the Jousting Lance leaves you very dangerously open to attacks, and you deal nowhere near enough damage in return. Trying to play it safe, I was able to last about half the night in one of my fights and couldn't even come close to killing any of the arms, let alone the head. It's a ridiculous fight that I definitely don't think is doable in a normal way. The twins are just like, I don't even know. They keep fixed distances from the player at multiple points during the fight, are pretty dangerous to get close to when you're able, and in their second phase, I don't see how you could possibly deal with them using the Jousting Lance or really any true melee weapon, because Spasmatism is always either dashing or spewing cursed flames, which you really don't want to get close to, and Retinazer in its second phase continually maintains distance from you, which makes it really hard to hit. Even using the Celestial Starboard, it's quite awkward trying to line up hits, and while I do see some pretty clear openings that you can take advantage of to get damage, unlike with Skeletron Prime, actually using them perfectly is at the very least far beyond me, and I still have absolutely no idea how you deal with Spaz in its second form. I wasn't even able to get it there in the fights that I did with the twins. The Destroyer is the only mechanical boss that is actually feasible to do with the Jousting Lance. It's still an intense fight, but in this one at least, distance isn't a problem because the boss doesn't fly or try to maintain distance purposefully, and even though the Jousting Lance is awkward, it does more than enough damage because it's an item that pierces through whatever it touches because of how it's designed. You just have to focus on dodging when it's important so that you don't die, and I know that's super broad, but that really is pretty much it. Make sure you don't get shot out of the sky by lasers or swarmed too heavily by drones, and you shouldn't have too much trouble whittling the Destroyer down. Plantera was very weird. This is the one fight where I got to try the Hallowed Jousting Lance, and it was just strange. I fleshed out my Plantera arena that I've been using a little more because I needed to in order to even attempt the fight with a weapon like this. Using any kind of momentum building becomes very limited in this battle, and it's almost all just the speed you get from falling and rising as you circle the boss in standard fashion that gives you damage amp with the Jousting Lance. Surprisingly, I was able to beat Plantera just by fighting how you normally do and chipping it down slowly with hits when I could, trying to make sure I took as little damage as possible during the first phase, which I think really is the key to winning, as the second phase of the fight is extremely difficult with all of the extra tentacles that the boss summons, which are extremely hard to do anything about with this weapon. Beating her just came down to very awkwardly trying to get her to run into the lance while retreating around the arena and dodging the tentacles as best I could, which ended up actually working. Past this, I think we run out of bosses that are really doable, at least that's how it seems to me. You really would need some kind of special setup or godlike ability, which I do not possess, in order to beat bosses with a Shadow Jousting Lance. Golem was the only fight I attempted after the point where it is obtained, and I gave it a few tries. It's an extremely shitty fight that comes down to slowly killing both of Golem's fists and then going for his head and body, and I had one decent attempt where I managed to get it into its second phase and was really just kind of stumped. It's certainly possible, I think, but it takes so damn long to do the fight because of how hard it is to actually hit anything with the Shadow Jousting Lance and deal significant damage without putting yourself at risk, and I just didn't feel like grinding out a boss that I wasn't even sure I could win against in this way, so I just left the tests there. What can I say about the Jousting Lances in conclusion? I am not surprised. They did perform a little better than I expected, taking the names of 3 bosses in spectacularly awkward fashion, but mostly just failing and feeling subpar to use at best. I think that they're a fun concept, and if you want to go the extra mile, they can do some really crazy things, but on my practical use scale, they're like a 5. And that's not an actual measurement, but trust me, if it was, that would be a really low score. I do wish that they were a little more usable, but understandably, not every weapon and item is created with greatness in mind, and the Jousting Lances happen to be a few shining examples of those. While most of the footage gathered was rather painful, messing around with these weapons was kind of fun, and you should try them yourself. Or don't. That's gonna be everything for this video though. I hope you had a good time, and I will see you in the next one.